The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
The crowds asked John the Baptist, "What should we do?" He said in reply, "Whoever has 2 cloaks should share with a person who has none, and whoever has food should do likewise." Even tax collectors came to be baptized, and they said to him, "Teacher, what should we do?" He answered, "Stop collecting more than what is prescribed." Soldiers also asked him, "And what is it that we should do?" He told them, "Do not practice extortion, and do not falsely accuse anyone, and be satisfied with your wages." Now the people were filled with expectation. All were asking in their hearts whether John might be the Christ. John answered them all, saying, "I am baptizing you with water, but one mightier than I is coming. I am not worthy to loosen the thongs of his sandals. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. His winnowing fan is in his hand to clear his threshing floor and to gather the wheat into his barn, but the chaff he will burn with unquenchable fire." Exhorting them in many other ways, he preached good news to the people. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I don't like being told how or what to feel. Few things bring out the curmudgeon in me, like a catchy slogan about positivity. You know, things like, "Don't worry, be happy," or "Start your day with a smile." Happiness is a choice. So this week's epistle, chock full of cheery imperatives such as "Rejoice in the Lord always, again I say rejoice," or "Do not be anxious about anything," conjure my inner teenager to rise up in rebellion. You know, medical science has confirmed as a fact that anxiety is dangerous to our health. It can raise our blood pressure, give us ulcers, can even cause severe chest pain. I know, been there, done that, got that memo. But does any one of us worry less because someone tells us to stop worrying? Or do we just now have one more thing to be anxious over? We can worry over the fact that we worry too much. But on a more serious pastoral note, I know the exhortation to rejoice always can do harm. Telling someone who struggles with clinical depression to rejoice always is just plain cruel. What really does help me as I ponder Paul's advice is to remember the context in which Paul was writing. Paul wrote these words while in prison. while he was awaiting going on trial and fully anticipating that, of course, he's going to be found guilty and sentenced to death. It also helps me to remember that Paul was someone who had been threatened, beaten, rejected, and shipwrecked. Someone whose haunted past included contempt, rage, and even violence. Paul was no Pollyanna. He was a tried and tested realist. So I realize that these verses from Philippians are not so much about what mood I'm in or trying to get me to feel good when I'm not, as much as they are about cultivating one's inner life. In Paul's view, peace and joy are not emotions that we raise up from within ourselves. Rather, peace and joy come from God. And the only way we can receive them for the gifts they are is through the consistent spiritual practices of prayer, seeking justice, being generous in charity, practicing gentleness and contemplation. I want to say that again. In Paul's view, peace and joy are not emotions we can raise up from within ourselves. Peace and joy come from God. And we can receive them only by living spiritual practices, prayer, pursuing justice, generosity and charity, and living in gentleness and contemplation. In other words, joy requires us to sidestep both cynicism and sentimentality. It requires that we hold together two realities at the same time. On the one hand, we hold the brokenness we experience in our world, and in the other, we hold the love of God. Joy is what happens when we live into the belief that God can bridge the gap between the world we long for and the world we experience. Joy is a posture. It's an orientation, a practice, a willingness to live gently but persistently in the tension of the not yet, assuring with the assurance that God's peace will guard our hearts and minds in that in-between space. This is joy. At its most robust and its most powerful. And no, it may not make us leap into the air or double over in laughter, but it will fill us with a calm and peaceful resolve that no slogan can contain or express.